So how is game development important for this course? Well, firstly, it's a fun way of learning programming, which is essentially half of the computer engineering. Programming teaches you how to think logically and creatively, which is an essential skill in this field. Not only that, but the designing of ideas is also an important aspect of computer engineering. Making this game will help you conceptualize and form ideas. As for the hardware, the game engine we will be using allows you to connect different peripherals and systems with the software to make the game more interactive. For example, the engine that we are using, the Unity game engine, actually supports VR headsets now. Overall, game development is very relevant to the field of computer engineering. After all, game consoles are more complex computers that work due to an advanced series of circuits. However, due to this online learning environment, we will likely focus on the software part. In this video, we'll be teaching you some simple parts of the game development process. You will learn how to create your own sprites and make your character move through user input. But in order to learn all this, you need to know what Unity Game Engine is. Unity is a free cross-platform engine that is available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. The engine itself can be used to create games for over 19 platforms including mobile, desktop, consoles, and virtual reality. It provides game developers with a 2D and 3D platform to create video games. This will be the main game engine that we use since it is free and it is easy to learn.
So this is our final project. As you can see, it's a game on Unity game engine that we made, and it's a pretty simple arcade style shooter game. So as you can see here, the aspects of the game. Here's the game over screen, and here's the main menu. So if you click play, your goal is to get a high score, and then the player dies when your health reaches 0. So I've reached the 0 health and now I died, and this is the game over screen, and I can keep playing the game over and over again, and my score over here on the left side, it actually goes over here at the game over screen as well, so the player can see the final high score. And this game was just made using various game objects, as I'll show you here. So we have our player, our canvas, our destroyer, and all these game objects and mechanics that work together to create our final project. And our final project is also on a website over here. So this is the website it's on, and we've uploaded it so anyone can play the game. And this game was actually made with these objectives in mind. So we had to create our final game, which is a space style shooter game, and we had to make sure the game was enjoyable. It had a wave system for the enemies, and the player movement was smooth. Shooting mechanics actually worked, and our 3 main scenes, the main menu, main game, and game over screen. And the game should be playable by anyone on a desktop to a website. These were the objectives we set for ourselves when we created this game.
So without further ado, let's get started with the lesson. I'll be teaching you guys the fundamentals of creating sprites, and I will also be using Photoshop to make the process easier. For our project, I created a rocket ship that fits the overall theme of the game. For the sake of the lesson, I'll be teaching you guys how to create a much simpler character so you won't be overwhelmed. With Pixar, I like to work with the 32x32 resolution since it's very easy to work with. For the rocket, I use the 64x64 resolution so I can get more details incorporated. Once you're fully loaded in, you might be overwhelmed, but for a task you really need to know about 2 tools in order to be successful. If you take a look on the left side, you will notice a bunch of icons, but this is just simply a toolbar. The pencil tool and the eraser tool are the only instruments that you need in order to make a character. When creating a character, you should have a sketch or inspiration in mind. Once you have gotten that, you should feel free to start outlining the character. When making sprites, you need to focus on the outline and the animation instead of thinking about the coloring process. Once you have a proper outline done, you can start to animate it. In order to do that, you have to click Window and enable the timeline. Once you do that, you have to look down and click the little arrow icon and click Create Frame Animation. Once you have gotten this far, the rest is just drawing. You need to draw each frame of the animation that you want the character to be doing. For our game, I had to draw 8 frames of the rocket doing a full spin. Normally a sprite should have about 4 to 8 frames, but in our case I'll be drawing 2 frames so you can understand the process easier. As you can see, I'm done with the animation, so I'm going to move on to the coloring process. With Pixar, it doesn't have to be so complicated. All you need is 3 shades of one color and you can get started. You have to think about where its shadows will be and where its highlights will be, and once you have sorted it all out, it should come to life. This is pretty much how I make all of my sprites, so hopefully you understand the process of making one. Now before we get started with the useless lesson, I need to teach you guys how to download Unity. It's really simple. All you guys gotta do is go on Google and search up Unity. Now once you do that, all you have to do is click on the first link, and in the top right it should say Get Started. Once you click on that, it should take you to a new page, and you gotta click on Individual, and then you gotta click on Get Started under Personal. Once that's there, all you have to do is click Download for Windows, and then it should download on your system.
After downloading the Unity game engine, we're gonna create our project, and we're just gonna click Create New Project. And since we're creating a 2D project, we're gonna select the 2D icon, and then we're gonna name our project. You can just name it whatever you want to your liking. Just do whatever you want, and then you're gonna click Create, and then Unity is gonna create your 2D project here, and you're just gonna have to wait a little bit. The first thing we're gonna do after our project is loaded up is that we're going to import our assets. So you're gonna click Assets on the top right, and then click Import New Assets, and then you're gonna locate the art that you have, click on it, and click Insert. Now that we've imported our assets, we're gonna change the aspect ratio for our game, and we're gonna change it to 9:16 because our game is vertical, and it also matches our background. As you see here, we've inserted our background, and it's also like a vertical shape, and that's why we want the 9:16 aspect ratio. It's because we want it to match our game and the assets we're using. So our background is now inserted, and now we're gonna split the sprites for our spaceships. So the way our art works is that all of the artwork and all of the spaceships are in one image. So what we're gonna do is actually split it up by clicking on our asset, then clicking on multiple sprite mode, and this will let us split up the sprites in the sprite editor. As you see here, we're gonna click the sprite editor, and we're gonna click apply, and now we can actually just split each spaceship because it's in one image and we want it to be in separate images. And now as you can see, each of the parts for a spaceship are split up into separate images instead of just one. Now we're gonna right click on the left part of our screen, and we're gonna click Create Empty, and we're gonna name this game object our player, and this is where our player is gonna be stored. And now we're gonna click Add Component, and we're gonna click the sprite render, and this will let us put in our sprite for our spaceship into the actual player. So like our player has that image, so we're just gonna drag one of our spaceships into the player sprite, and now as you can see, we have our player set up on the background, and we're just gonna make it a little bit bigger so it's easier for our consumer to see our player, so they can play around with it easily and view it. Now we're gonna add a script to our player so we can start to actually program our player, and this is actually where we can actually start to sort of add inputs to our player. So for example, we're gonna set up our keys. So for example, if the player presses W, our sprite on the background is actually gonna move up, and if they press A, it's gonna move left, and so on. And that's what we're gonna do now. We're gonna get to the programming part of this assignment. So we're gonna click Add Component, type in script, and add a new script, and we're gonna name that script Player Movement because that's what we're gonna be doing with that program. Now we're gonna click Edit Script so we can actually start to program. So our Visual Studio Code has opened up, and it should look something like this for you as well. If it doesn't, just type in the code the same way it's shown here. And the first thing we're gonna do is create our move function. So under update, we're gonna create our move function. So we're gonna type in player void, and then we're just gonna name it move. And then so we're gonna put this function in the update because every frame we want that function to run. So once we're inputting keys, we want to make sure that the player is also moving once you input those keys every single frame. And now we're going to start to type up our actual important code. So we're going to create our variable delta x, and that's our input.getAxis. And so basically we want the player to move horizontally by the move speed every time a key on the horizontal axis is pressed, and that's what's happening here. And the reason we do it by time.delta time is because that's for every frame, so it's accurate. If we didn't do that, then there'd be some delay, and we don't want the delay. And we're going to create our move speed up at the top as well. That's our variable, and for now we're just going to name it to 10 speed. That's just like a placeholder for now. Now we're gonna make our new position variable, and that's just transform.position.x. So every time the game object moves, it's gonna match that value and update it as well in the delta x. And now I'm gonna show you what getAxis horizontal actually does. So if you go to our project settings and then go to the input manager, you can actually see what horizontal means. So we're just gonna move this window to the left here a little bit, so we can see it easily. So you can see what horizontal means here. So for example, I have the positive button as A and the negative button as D. So if we press A, it's gonna move to the left, and if we press D, it's gonna move to the right. So now you have a better idea of what getAxis.horizontal in our code actually does. And I just want to show you that for context, so you understand what the code does a little bit more and how it connects to the Unity game engine. Now we're gonna do the same thing but for the vertical position. So up until now we've just covered the left and right. So if the player presses A, it's gonna move to the left. If the player presses D, it's gonna move to the right. But now we also want up and down, so W and S. And it's basically just the same code, but you replace getAxis horizontal to vertical, and position transform.position to x to transform.position.y, because that's the y direction, right? Because x is horizontal and y is vertical. And so we just created that. And at the bottom here, we're gonna do transform.position equals new vector, and then we're just gonna input our x and y position, and that's just gonna help the game recognize a little bit more what we're doing and update it as we go through, so that our code doesn't break. And that's what that does. And now if you start actually clicking play, our player is gonna start moving. If you press W and all of that, as you can see, our player is moving. And you can actually change the move speed on the right here as well, because we've done a serialized field. So if we change it to 6, it's gonna slow down. And our code here is basically done for the movement now.
So the task we have assigned you guys for today is to follow our tutorial to create your own moving spaceship. We have linked you the assets. You can also experiment and research to create your own short little game. This will be the hands-on learning aspect of the project. After that, please complete our test on Google Forms to test your theoretical knowledge of the Unity game engine.